Okay, this video is an intro to adaptive components, and we'll start out by making a 4-point adaptive component, and this is a tree column. So we have point 1, 2, 3, and 4, and if I take any of these points and move them, you'll see that the column adapts to the movement of the points. And then we're going to take this file into the conceptual massing environment where we make this long span structure that we apply these adaptive columns to. And how that works is if I delete one of these columns and I drag my adaptive component out, I'm going to host it to point 1, point 2, and then 3 and 4. And if I manipulate this geometry that I've set up here, you'll see that the columns adapt to it. Okay, so let's get started. So we're going to open up a new family. That's where we'll find the adaptive component. And if you scroll down under generic model, you'll find generic model adaptive. Okay, so I'm going to start out by using these reference planes just to define my initial geometry. So I'm going to take this center reference plane and I'm going to use my shift control drag and make a few copies. And I'll set these at 10 feet apart. And this is just to construct the initial points. And I'm going to make a new level. Again, I'm going to shift control drag, set this to 10 feet. That'll be for setting up my second point. And then I'll shift control drag and I'm going to set up points 3 and 4 at 20 feet away from that level. Okay, so I'm going to host all of these points. I'm going to host them all to this left-right reference plane. So I'm going to make that the current reference plane, and I'm just going to go to the view cube and click on the right view. Okay, so now I just have some basic geometry that I can plot points to build my model. So from the ribbon, I'll click on point element. I'll pick point 1, place point 2, 3, and 4. Hit escape a few times and use shift in the middle wheel to orbit. Okay, so here are my 4 points. Now I have to select all 4 points. I'm doing that with a window selection. And from the ribbon, I need to click on Make Adaptive. And you'll see Revit numbers them in order of creation. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, now I can host geometry to these reference points or these adaptive points. And I want to use reference geometry. And we're just going to host some circles to each one of these points. So I'm going to go to reference and I'm going to choose a circle. Now what's really important is that I make the adaptive points work plane current. So I didn't do that. I'm going to hit escape. And I'm going to put my cursor over point 1 and I'm going to tab through until it selects the XY plane of that adaptive point. That makes it current. Very important step. And I'm going to click on reference, circle, and I'm going to snap. Make sure my point snap shows up, and I'm going to create my circle, my reference circle. Hit escape, and I'm going to add some parameters to this family. I'm going to select this, make the dimension permanent, select the dimension, go up to Label, Add Parameter, and I'll call this R base. Click OK. And I'll go to my family types, and I'm going to set this parameter to 3 foot. Okay. Alright, now it's important to test this out. Can I select that point and move it, and my circle is hosted to it? So that's working. I'm going to Control Z a couple times to undo and just get it back to its initial location. So now I'll host a reference circle to adaptive point number 2. So I want to put my cursor over adaptive point number 2, tab until the XY plane shows up. Select it, it makes it the current work plane, and make another reference circle snapping to that point. I'll select it, make its dimension permanent, select the dimension, and I'm going to label it with a new parameter. I'll call this R top. Now I'm going to form a parametric relationship between these two circles by going to the family types, and I'm going to make R top half of R base. So I can copy and paste the text from R base, paste it into R top, and say divide by 2. Okay, so I have that relationship. If R base is 6 feet, click apply, R top will be 3 feet. Okay, so now I can select my 2 reference circles using the Control key, and I can click on Create Form. Okay, so that's working. And let me just test this out by selecting that point and moving it. Just undo a few times to get it back to its original location. Okay, so I'm going to make 2 more reference circles hosted to points 3 and 4. So again, I have to tab through and select the XY plane of point 3, and we'll place a reference circle on it, snapping to point. Hitting escape a few times, select the circle, make its dimension permanent, select the dimension, and we're going to label it with our 3rd parameter, which is going to be, we'll call this R struct for our structure. And go to the family types, and I'm going to make this R struct, I'm going to make it half of R top. So I'm going to take our top and copy it and paste it. Control C, Control V, and I'm going to divide by 2. Okay, and I'm going to make another circle on adaptive point 4. Snap to the point. Select the circle, make the dimension permanent. Now when I select this dimension, I already have the parameter that I want. I already have the R structure. Okay. So now I'm going to create 2 more forms from point 2 to 3 and from point 2 to 4. So I have to go in here and tab through and make sure that I can select my reference line, and you'll see it in the lower left. Reference lines will show up. I select that reference line, and I select this reference line and hit Create Form, and do the same thing for the other side. Okay, so here is the adaptive component. Just want to test it by flexing it. Make sure everything's working. Okay, so let's make some geometry to host this adaptive tree column too. So I'm going to go to the big R and I'm going to go to New, Conceptual Mass. And I'll start with the mass template. Okay, so I'm going to set up some parametric geometry. So I'm going to select the work plane that's running north-south, and I'm going to hold down my control and my shift, and I'm going to drag it out. And we'll start with it being 100 feet apart. And I'm going to take my work plane that's running east-west, and I'm going to control shift drag, make a copy and also keeping it in line. And I'll just set these up at 50 feet apart. Okay, so I'm going to need 4 points to host to. So I'll start with my base point. I'm going to create a reference rectangle and I'm going to host it to level 1. So I click on level 1 to make that the current work plane. Click on reference rectangle. And I'm going to snap to my work planes. So this is going to be 100 feet by 100 feet. I'm going to lock all these so that I can move my reference planes and the geometry is going to adapt to it. Escape a few times. I'm going to select that reference rectangle, hit create form, and I'm going to choose the surface option. Okay, I'm going to select the surface and click on divide surface, and I'm going to set the grid to 8 by 8. Okay, now so this is where I'll host point 1 of my tree column. So to turn the points on for this surface, I need to select it, go up to surface representation, click on the down arrow and choose nodes. Okay, so now I have a bunch of points at level 1 that I can host the first point of the adaptive column to. So now I need my second point. So I'm going to need a level 2. So I'm going to select level 1 and control shift drag up. And we'll set level 2. We'll set it at 20 feet. Okay. So now using a window selection, I can select my reference rectangle and my divided surface. I want to select both of them. So I'm using a window selection. And I'm going up to the ribbon, and under clipboard, I'm clicking on copy to clipboard, and click on the down arrow and choose align to selected levels. And I'm going to choose level 2. Okay. So now that should be hosted to level 2. If I move the height of level 2, that geometry will move with it. Okay, so those are my points that I'll host point 1 and 2 from that adaptive column. And now I'm going to set up this roof geometry, this curved roof, where I can host the top of the columns. So I'm going to need a few more levels for that. So I'm going to make levels 3, 4, and 5. So I start by selecting level 2, shift control. So I'm going to make this 10 feet from the level below. So there's 3, select that, shift drag it up, 4, and 5. Okay. So I'm going to start by drawing the lower arc of my roof, and I'm going to host it to this center left-right reference plane. So I'm going to select that first, and I'm going to go to a right view by clicking on the view cube, clicking on right, and I'm going to draw a reference arc using start end radius arc. And I'm going to start here at level 3, click there, go across, to the other side, and I'm going to put the arc at level 4. Hit escape, and just orbit around using shift and the middle wheel. Okay, so I have an arc here. Now I'm going to host an arc that's higher up to this reference plane in front. I'm going to click on my right view, zoom in here, and create another reference arc, start end radius. And I'm going to start by hosting it to level 4 and put the arc at level 5 and hit escape. So again, just using the work planes to set up some geometry. I'm going to select both of these reference lines, and I'm going to hit create form. So there's our roof, and I can select that surface, click on divide surface, and I'm going to divide this into smaller amounts than the lower levels, so 4 and 4. And I need to turn on my points. So from the ribbon under surface representation, I'm going to click on nodes. Okay, so now I'm ready to bring in my adaptive column. So I'm going to Control Tab over to that file, click on load into project, and I'm going to host my first point. And I can tell I'm already going to have a problem because I'm getting the no symbol, but we're going to address that. So I'm going to click point 1. So I'm just using the point that's 1 in from the edges. And I'm going to do that the same thing for the second level for point 2. And then points 3 and 4, I'm going to follow the edge of this roof. First point there, second point there. Hit escape a few times. So now you see we have this twisting, and this has to do with the orientation of the adaptive points. So what I can do is Control Tab back to my column family, and I can start by saying I want these points to be orientated in the X, Y, Z world, so that when I host it to those points in the roof mass that we just made, it doesn't try to be perpendicular to those points. It just hosts this point exactly like we see it here. So I'm going to select all 4 of these points, and it's easier if I use a shortcut WF for wireframe, then I can see all 4 points. I'm going to use my control key and select all 4, and from the properties panel I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to find orientation, and by default it's host reference. So I'm going to change that to be orthogonal in family. So it's going to use the world XYZ, and I'm going to click apply, and I'm going to click on load into project to reload it, and I can overwrite the existing version, and this gets rid of the twisting. But you see I have an issue at the base, the way it's hosting that base circle. So I'm going to go back, Control Tab back to my adaptive component, and I can try by just manipulating that first point and see if that's going to work for me. So I'm going to select that point, and I'm going to change it to orthogonal on placement. And it's a little bit of trial and error, but I'm going to see if this works for me. Click apply, load into project, overwrite existing version, and that seems to work. It seems like there's some twisting here following these circles up. So I'm going to go ahead and change all 4 points. I'm going to change them all to orthogonal on placement. Load into project, overwrite. Okay, so that got rid of my twisting, and the column is sitting flat on the first level. So I'm going to go ahead and create 4 more columns in a similar way. So to do that, I have to scroll down in the project browser and expand families, and my adaptive component is going to be under generic models. I'll click on the plus for generic model. I need to expand the family as well. Click on it and drag it onto the canvas, and I'm going to host point 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I'm going to do that a couple more times. Now I can also select the column, right click on it, and say create similar. One, 2, 3, and 4. And then my last one. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so now we set up this geometry to be parametric, so we should be able to select this work plane and drag it forward and have our columns adapt to it. We can make it wider. I have to do this on both sides since I used that start and radius arc. We can lower the base of the column by selecting level 2, and I can lower that level. So we get a taller tree, or maybe we want to raise that up a bit. And we can adjust heights of some of these levels too to make it a little taller. Okay, that's it for the introduction to adaptive components.